Hello, everyone, and welcome to a very special edition of Polarized, where we are doing a deep dive on Elizabeth Holmes, the CEO and founder of Theranos, which went bankrupt due to fraudulent activity and losing billions overnight. And we have a full story on this today because Elizabeth Holmes is back in the headlines doing a People cover article on her time in prison and the company she's hoping to start when she is released. And I thought, if this woman is going to start a new company and get back out there again, I need to know a little bit more about Elizabeth and how someone could go from a very smart, educated, Stanford going woman to creating a billion-dollar company and then engaging in fraudulent activity, which made it bankrupt overnight and losing all of her fortune. So Elizabeth was born in 1984 in Washington, D.C., and many have said that growing up, she always said, I want to be a billionaire. I want to be a billionaire. She was very success-driven, even from an early age. Her mother was a congressional staffer on Capitol Hill. Her father was a vice president at Enron. If you remember, it was a company that went bankrupt after fraudulent practices in 2001, where he was fired overnight and the family lost everything. As you can imagine, being vice president at Enron, they had a pretty comfortable lifestyle, and that was taken away. They relocated at that time to Houston, Texas. Her parents put a lot of pressure on her to excel academically. She was very academic focused. A lot of people were saying she wasn't very social. She didn't really hang out with the kids. She wasn't like the others. She was just very focused on the path that she was on. She was very into computer programming. She took a lot of courses at Stanford, even when she was still in high school. In fact, she was given a spot on a program that was going to Beijing, which was often not given to high schoolers, but she had proven herself and they made an exception to bring her along. This became a very important milestone and pivotal moment in Elizabeth's life because it is where she met Sunny Balwani. At the time, he was 47 and she was 18, and he became a pivotal role in her life and in her company. At the time, he was a mentor to her and a millionaire and very successful. And Elizabeth loved being around him, and she was super excited to learn from him. So after this trip, Sunny and Elizabeth stayed in touch. She was accepted into Stanford University and majored in chemical engineering. And in 2002, she was accepted in a research laboratory in Singapore working on the SARS pandemic, which was huge at the time. She really wanted to develop a wearable drug delivery patch. That was her main focus. She came up with a company called Real Time Cures. This was her first company. Her own fear of needles and all those kind of like tests that we all have to take, and so many needles and so much blood, she had such a fear of that. And that is why she wanted to make it easier for everybody. Her own fear of needles was the inspiration, and she raised millions. By 2004, her company was successful enough that she actually dropped out of Stanford. She rebranded the company from Real Time Cures to Theranos. So why Theranos? What does it mean? It is a combination of the word therapy and diagnosis. She developed a device at this time that used one single drop of blood to complete multiple amounts of tests. Within 6 years of starting this company, she raised $92 million. In 2008, in fact, her mentor, Sunny, joined as president and CEO. He even invested $13 million of his own money. He had never run labs. He had no scientific background, but his background was in tech. And he had previously worked for Microsoft, which Elizabeth was a huge fan of. Microsoft, Apple. She was so inspired by the CEOs and the way these companies ran, and she wanted to model her own company after those. So she thought he would be a great fit. It later came out to find that they had been dating since 2003. She did not disclose this to anybody, especially the board members of her company. They kept it very hush-hush. No one had any idea. He was not well liked in Theranos. To put it mildly, he was said to be aggressive, unreasonable. He didn't have the respect because he didn't have much experience with med. He would berate the staff. For so many reasons, people were not thrilled he was around. Theranos had its official launch in 2013. She ran Theranos under what she called the stealth mode, explaining to everyone who was hired that they had to operate this way because of trade secrets. Employees had to sign extensive NDAs. And they had an in-house legal team. Everything was in-house in its own departments, and no departments were really allowed to talk to each other. They could only do what their department and what they were hired to do. So Theranos grew incredibly quickly, raising tons of money. And this meant acquiring a large amount of scientists. There were lots of departments, as I said, and they were all purposely kept very, very small, not interacting with one another. The only two people in all of Theranos that knew about every single department that was in there was Sunny and Elizabeth. So during this time, Elizabeth is described as just a master of marketing. She is now pulling billions of dollars of funding from the who's who in the tech world. And she is so excited about this. And she's so excited about the future of where this company is going. She would use her own family's illnesses and deaths as part of her marketing to pull on kind of the heartstrings of the investors, talking about her own personal experiences of how she wished that they had known the symptoms sooner or had diagnoses sooner, and that with this new product that she's investing, you will be able to test from your own home. It just takes one little drop of blood and you'll be able to test for a gamut of illnesses. And of course, with any illness, the earlier you find out, the more treatable it is. And so she had everyone abuzz about this new company. Elizabeth was obsessed with Steve Jobs. She actually had some high up people at Apple come over and join her team and the board. And if you remember, Steve Jobs infamously had his turtleneck kind of outfit, and she would end up mimicking that and always wearing the same thing. In interviews with highly successful people and entrepreneurs, they all say that kind of having the same outfit, the same look, makes the morning very easy for them. There's not much thought that has to go into what you're wearing. You just pull. It's just, they all have a very simplified morning routine. And they say that's the key to starting off your day on the right foot. And it gives them one less thing to have to think about. And she adopted that same mentality. So it was reported by most people who worked there that it was a very difficult working environment. She expected everyone to put in 10 to 12-hour days, even though their contracts when they were hired, said, a normal 9 to 5. If you weren't there at 7 a.m. and staying till after dinner, you were definitely looked down upon. You were looked at not committed enough, not working hard enough. And you were only to give her positive feedback. It was very much circulated around that you couldn't tell her that things weren't working. You couldn't tell her that maybe we should try it this way, or like there's something wrong with this. She only wanted to hear what was working and nothing else. After a while, it came out that she fired her chief of finance because he wouldn't falsify the projections for investors. He was the one person in the company refusing to only give positive responses. He wanted to give the honest truth. He was put out. Sunny actually ended up bolstering projections 10 times what they were actually capable of achieving. He had zero issue with falsifying the information, falsifying the results, and giving inflated reports to the investors and the trustees. After the CFO was fired, they never rehired one. So they went without since 2006. So Sunny and Elizabeth took that on themselves. It was one less person to look at the actual data. So meanwhile, they're still trying to perfect this at-home advice that they've been raising money for. It's not working the way that they're saying that it's working. They would do these demonstrations for investors knowing it didn't work. But again, they had no problem falsifying the outcomes because in their minds, they believed that it eventually would. So this device that she's promising all the investors is called the Edison device. And all these investors are anxiously awaiting it coming to market. So it's the small compact device would actually replace this big bulky equipment and be an all-in-one solution for all the tech labs across the world. Her facilities were said to be not up to code and actually kind of disgusting and very unkempt, especially if you're handling blood and it needs to be a sanitized situation. It was the opposite of that. So in 2012, they even went to Walgreens saying and promising that this device is already working and that it can perform 150 tests just from one tiny drop of blood. Walgreens was obviously super excited, and they assured Walgreens that they would get the correct approvals. They had been operating as if they already had the FDA approval, which they did not, although they were telling Walgreens they did. The employees were operating machines that they weren't even licensed to, giving bad test results, not much done to protect the patient's samples. They were spilling, they were getting contaminated. It was a disaster. Since no one was allowed into any of the other departments, everyone had to trust that either Elizabeth and Sunny were telling them the correct information and that everything was copacetic. During this time, Elizabeth is on the covers of every single magazine. She is on every single news station. She is getting so much attention, which again brings in dollars. She has her little device showing off this little tiny nano container, which she says is working amazingly, and she can't wait to mass produce it. The goal, she says, is to empower the individual to do it on their own and make lab information more accessible from your own home. I mean, it sounds amazing. Okay, in actuality, it sounds like it would have been an amazing idea to have. She had huge names, huge investors, all getting key roles on the board. Okay, so what is the board of trustees' roles? What are they supposed to be doing that they're not doing? How could this actually happen? Okay, a board of directors is meant to hold the CEO accountable and could even replace a CEO if they feel they are underperforming or not acting on the company's best interest. Normally, a board is allowed access to all aspects of the business. Clearly, this was not happening at Theranos. They were not giving access to contracts, lab results, audits. She would delay any such requests. If any board member came to her and said, we really need to see this, or can you get us this for the next meeting? She would always delay. She had many, many tactics of how she knew to delay any information that was asked of her that she couldn't get. She would say, no, it's under legal review, or saying she would circle back, in another meeting. She was always delaying, or said that she would have it in the next quarter. There were no medical experts on the board at all, just wealthy CEOs and investors. Okay, so at this time, just to keep it in perspective, Elizabeth owns half of the company, putting her net worth around 4.5 billion. The company is estimated to be worth around 10 billion at this time. She is now the youngest billionaire in the world. So this Edison device could only detect a fraction of the illnesses and disease that she had been advertising. And they would actually use commercial analyzers to conduct the vast majority of tests, not the device she's saying that she's using. Employees are now quitting out of unethical and illegal practices, and she's making them delete results that she doesn't want, and they're not going to stand for this anymore. And they are now becoming the whistleblowers. They also are alleging that she prioritized the speed of the results over safety and quality control. So to give an example of how this is affecting everyone in the company, the people who are leaving, the whistleblowers, one of them, his name is Ian Gibbons, was subpoenaed and asked to testify against Elizabeth. He had raised concerns earlier and was fired by Elizabeth and then rehired hours later and demoted for doing so. Once he was subpoenaed, he was so stressed about losing his job, he started drinking, his wife says, and he couldn't stand that he was going to have to testify against Elizabeth, that the anxiety of going to work was really weighing on him. The night before he was supposed to appear in court, he overdosed on Tylenol and sadly later passed away in the hospital the morning he was supposed to appear. His wife calls into Theranos reporting, his death and distraught, and did not hear back from them all day. And then finally later that afternoon, she hears back and all they said was, we need to collect his laptop and all of his information that is now ours. And there was nothing else, no emotion, nothing they received. No, I'm sorry. It was just, we are coming to get his things. So on March 14th, 2018, Elizabeth and Sunny were charged with fraud by the FCC for exaggerating and making false statements about the company's technology, business, and financial performance. The charges also said that they knew that they could only carry out about 12 of the 200 tests that they advertised on the patent testing menu. And the company lied about its revenue projections and regulatory approval. It was also revealed that the company was using modified third-party machinery without disclosing it to the public. At this trial, she was found guilty of the 4 of the 11 federal charges. Interestingly enough, she was acquitted on 4 charges related to defrauding patients. Sunny was sentenced as well to 11 years and 3 months in federal prison, and they are now currently both in prison serving their sentence. Elizabeth got hers reduced to 9 years because of good behavior, and in her first interview since prison for People magazine, we hear from her own words how she's doing and what her plans are for the future. So at the time of this interview for People magazine, she has now served about 2 years of her 9-year sentence. And she still maintains her innocence, acknowledging that, quote, "there are things I would have done differently." She considers her trial and conviction in a San Jose courtroom in 2022 to be a miscarriage of justice. First, it was about accepting it happened, she says. Then it was about forgiving myself for my own part. And I refused to plead guilty to crimes I did not commit. Theranos failed, but failure is not fraud. That is the statement that she made, which I find to be fascinating at her lack of accountability for her role. And that is very concerning to me. On the stand during the trial, doctors and patients testified that the blood tests Holmes developed and marketed were a healthcare scam. One woman claimed test results showed that she had had a miscarriage when she was actually pregnant. Another patient was told he might have prostate cancer when he did not. A third received a false HIV diagnosis. While Holmes was acquitted of these fraud charges related to the patients, the lives of the people that were given these false results were forever changed. They are traumatized. They were treated for things they didn't have or left untreated for things they did have. For her to not own her part in that is mind-blowing to me. She and Sonny were also ordered to pay $452 million in restitution. So she has now lost her entire fortune. She is in prison. Holmes is alleging that she had trauma from her childhood and that she was abused and manipulated by Sonny during their relationship. He denies it, of course, and that all played a role in her bad decision-making. She claimed that he controlled everything from the food she ate to her daily schedule and kept her away from family. She says, "I wish that I left or I had seen the abuse or understood it and why I didn't. And I'm finding peace with that. It can break a lot of people. And I was able to rise through it as best as I can." So before she went to prison, she gave birth to her first child, William, just weeks before the trial began. Her partner, Evans, who she met at a rooftop charity party in October 2017, during the height of the scandal, presented a silver snake ring bought at a Taylor Swift Reputation Tour concert when he proposed to her a year later. A year later, Holmes was pregnant again with daughter Invicta, Latin for invincible, which delayed her prison start by 1 month. She says being separated from her children now absolutely shatters her world. She does see them twice a week for a few hours total. Her daily routine in prison includes a workout, vegan meals, teaching French to other inmates, and working on her campaign to reform the criminal justice system. Once a week, Holmes attends a cognitive and behavioral therapy for PTSD overseen by a psychiatrist. She also counsels inmates who are rape survivors. It helps her to find meaning in her incarceration. So Holmes is now 41 years old. She is scheduled for release on April 3rd, 2032. She's serving the 9-year sentence, as I said, reduced from the 11-year sentence. So what are Elizabeth's plans for when she is released in 2032? She says that she hopes to travel with her family and to fight for reform of criminal justice system. She recently drafted an American Freedom Act bill, a 7-page handwritten document to bolster the presumption of innocence and change criminal procedure. "This will be my life's work," says Holmes, adding that she's speaking out now as part of her mission to advocate on behalf of incarcerated persons and those ripped away from their children. When the time to turn herself in finally arrived on May 30th, 2023, she approached the prison gates in a Ford Expedition while hurriedly using a high-tech LV breast pump to collect milk for her 3-month-old child, Invicta, who was in the back seat. I'll tell you why this is important in a second. Upon surrendering, she told guards that she was breastfeeding her child and was allowed to bring 2 pumps with her into detention. Over the next week, she collected a small amount of milk in a plastic bag. "I wanted my daughter to have her mother's milk," she recalls. "It was important to me because it was a way to love her in here." Later, Holmes spoke to the prison's warden about allowing women to breastfeed privately, and authorities eventually built multiple lactation rooms in the housing units in 2023. One dimly lit lactation station features a large mural of a mother holding her baby, alongside a freezer to store the milk for the next visit. So despite her global reputation as a biotech con artist to put lives at risk, she says she's continuing to write patents for new inventions and plans to resume her career in healthcare technology after her release. She says, there is not a day I have not continued to work on my research and inventions. I remain completely committed to my dream of making affordable healthcare solutions available to everyone. So while I always think it's great to turn your pain into purpose, her lack of accountability and acknowledgement of her harming of so many people is really tough for me in her future goals of developing future companies and doing this again, hopefully the right way. But it's going to be a hard sell to any investors to invest in a woman who doesn't take accountability for their wrong actions, because I would be worried she would make the same decisions again. There would need to be a board of directors that had clearly people with medical knowledge, how to run a business, complete transparency and oversight of every single department within that company. I mean, all the things that she did to hide would need to be exposed. Again, I am not sure that she learned the lesson in there. I do love that she's trying to do good. I'm just concerned that she hasn't fully acknowledged and healed the parts of her that will allow her to do so. So would you invest in a company by Elizabeth Holmes? Let me know in the comments below.